So what I'm going to talk about is web data. So at our company, we basically aggregate a ton of web data and information, and it gets used for a lot of different interesting purposes. So I'm going to kind of give you a little context of what we do, and then tell you some interesting use cases that we've seen or we've put together ourselves. So I call it a critical piece of modern marketing, but typically it's often overlooked. And when I say modern, I mean basically data-driven. So just set up the context real quick. I know a lot of folks here, when we work with data science, they're typically looking at internal data. Internal data is obviously easier to access, relatively easier to work with. Obviously, there's challenges, but it's readily available, right? But the problem is that it presents sort of a narrow view. You're looking at what your company does or what your organization does, so you're limited to that one slice, right? But of course, we all know there's a larger world out there with all sorts of other interesting data that could probably be useful to what you're doing. But that data, of course, is in different formats, scattered over the web and things like that. So we tend to avoid that because it's just much harder to get to. So what we do at Datafiniti is effectively make it really easy to include web data in whatever it is you're doing. We've already had a few folks here talk about looking at web information. And obviously, they kind of alluded to things they had to go through to get that data. We try and make that entire process as simple as hitting an API. So behind the scenes, what we do is we develop scrapers. We do a lot of testing and production crawling. We import that all into a single database that's indexed across hundreds of different attributes. We have a pretty extensive QA process that not only makes sure the data is accurate, but also normalizes and merges data together. So at the end, you basically have this giant database of, we focus on products, businesses, and real estate records right now. But for example, a property record would have the price from everything from Amazon to Best Buy to Walmart for that one thing. So it makes it really easy to tackle that. So the final output, like I said, is clean web data. Currently we have 37 million businesses, 71 million products, and 5 million property records, and those are going up by hundreds of thousands per day, I think. So that's just a quick context. So what can we actually do with this? So what I'm going to do is talk through a few different sort of fun research things we've done on our own to kind of showcase what you can do with this data. So the first thing we did was we pulled a bunch of luxury shoe listings on a bunch of different retailers. What we were curious to start with was, basically, if it says Jimmy Choo or Prada or Tory Burch on it, how much is that worth compared to like an average shoe? Like basically, what's the brand markup of that shoe? So we pulled data on, I think, 25,000 products across 8 different retailers. And there were 379 brands within that. We bucketed it out into different price groups. So we aggregated everything by brand, and then we said, okay, there's X many listings within $100, X many within $200, and so on, right? I think the actual range went everywhere from maybe $10 to, I think there's a shoe that was like $3,500 or something like that. And the cool thing is we could build this really nice graph or chart of all the different brand markups. So we were just looking at luxury shoe brands. So we have Tory Burch as the cheapest luxury shoe brand, all the way down to Brunello Cucinelli, I don't know, at 1,400 average. So what you can see here is this dashed line is the average price of non-luxury shoes. So everything beyond that is basically the effective brand markup of that shoe. So yeah, so I guess if you're buying a Fendi shoe, you are paying, that's like 100 over to about like $900 for Fendi to be on your shoe, right? The shoe's still going to take you to where you want to go. That's the cynical way of looking at it. I understand there's value assigned to that. So the cool thing is that we're not obviously experts on fashion data. I'm this other guy in the room, but we were able to pull this information really quickly because of how accessible we had made it. But as we actually started to dive into data a little more, we found another interesting trend, which was that everyone basically uses a 3x3 pricing strategy. Every shoe averages on either $300, $700, or $1,000 for their lineup, and they either use a normal distribution for prices, a weighted distribution to like a premium markup, or they use like 2 or 3 overlapping normal distributions. So everyone does this sort of, they pick one of these 9 possibilities and go with that across the 300 brands or whatever. So these are just some examples. So like Tory Burch and Rag & Bone, they use this normal distribution. Then you have these what we call premium anchors that like Prada and Fendi use. You can see like most of their listings are over there on this side, but then you have like a handful of products that are sort of, we thought, kind of made the brand more appreciated in value, basically. And then we call it a double dip, where you have these like peaks and valleys that they kind of have like 2 different lineups going on to maybe attract 2 different markets. So again, just looking at a ton of data and making it really accessible turns the problem of having to look at multiple retailers and understanding what's going on with the pricing really easy. So the next thing we did was we kind of took the same approach. We looked at nutritional supplements, which I think a lot of people have this kind of like, is it really worth what I'm getting here kind of thing going on. We're just curious what the pricing distributions were for those. So we looked at, I think it was vitamin D, creatine, and fish oil. And what we found was in a lot of cases for vitamins or nutritional supplements, you have this weighted curve where there's basically like a long tail distribution. You have a lot of prices around an average, but then there's a lot of vendors that'll try and basically, well, it kind of feels like they're just like trying to rip you off, basically, because it's the same thing. Like creatine is creatine, you can't really do anything to it. And so we found this kind of, I think it kind of plays into people's perceptions, like people are trying to like sort of extract value from customers that's not really there, and that seems to kind of play out in the data. So yeah, these are the different distribution curves. Again, these are all aggregated from multiple retailers, so you're seeing a market view really quickly. And then we did one with hotel reviews. So we pulled 400,000 hotel reviews across different websites, and we grouped it by state and kind of figured out which states have the best or worst hotels. And we found that so I think Hawaii and Nevada had really good ratings, and really strangely, DC and Virginia had like really awful ratings. I think, yeah, DC averaged below 3. That's really bad. Virginia was, I guess, 3. So yeah, really poor. And then weirdly enough, I think Idaho does really well. I don't know. Maybe it's like expectations. Huh? Oh, of course. All right. Sure. And then you can also like kind of, I mean, this is intuitive, maybe obvious, but you can kind of figure out which states are tourist states because they generate a high number of reviews relative to the population. So places like Nevada and Florida, stuff like that. And then we also looked at tourism budget versus number of reviews. It's kind of like a proxy, like how well they're generating tourism. And surprisingly, Hawaii does pretty poorly. Texas, Nevada, New York all do pretty well. And Michigan has problems on both fronts. Anyway. And so the last one I want to go through, which is I think a pretty timely one, is are there enough rooms for everyone during South by? So I mean, most people here are from Austin or live here. So you guys are probably all aware about kind of the, I guess, controversy around short-term rentals, Airbnbs, that kind of stuff. The city just recently banned certain types, and there's a lot of worry that they're going to eventually ban all of them. So we were curious. Obviously, a ton of people come into South by from out of town, and South by is growing every year. crazy, right? Like it generates like $300 million for the city every year. What we did was we basically were able to use our property data that has a lot of STR information to determine capacity for tourists. And then we had to do some outside research to figure out how many people actually come in for South by. So figuring out capacity was really easy because we already had that data available. Figuring out how many people come into Austin was very difficult. So the problem is that South by publishes a lot of good information about official stuff, like official hotel bookings and stuff like that. But I think we all know that a ton of people come here without a badge. A ton of people don't stay at hotels because they're ridiculously expensive and all that kind of stuff. So we actually ended up settling on, where is it? Yeah, it's in there. I've ended up finding the airport publishes how many people deplane every month. So I use that as a proxy, and I was like, okay, let's assume during March, half of those deplane people are here during South by, and I'll go with that. And that was the best thing I could find. So it came out to about 250,000 people come in from out of town during South by. And then the capacity you have, if you also include hotels, let me scroll down a bit. So this is the math I did. I basically created this like metric called visitor nights. So like if everyone stays on average 4.8 nights, which is what South by reports, then what you come out to is you have enough room for about 2,000 extra visitors right now. But if you have 250,000 people coming in, you're basically at capacity, right? And the math is a little rough, so just assume it's at capacity. But the surprising thing is that half of the capacity comes from STRs. So hotel rooms provide about 37,000 people for the stay, and the STRs provide about, I think, 30,000, 34,000. And so obviously that's hugely important to an event like South by because they simply wouldn't be able to have people come into Austin. Some people ask me, well, what's important is the type 2s because those are the ones that are being banned, so how many type 2s are there? And there's an official listing of like 400 type 2s based on licenses given out by the city. But if I look at the actual data, and if I assume that any place that can hold more than 7 people is a type 2, which is probably a reasonable thing to think, then you're actually, it goes up to like over 1,000 listings, which I think when I tallied up the number of people that could stay there, it was like 11,000 people. So cutting out type 2 has like a huge impact on things like South by or I don't know, ACL, stuff like that, where the city just wouldn't be able to support people coming into it. So these are some like simple examples about what can be done when you actually make messy web external data possible. We just did some simple analysis ourselves. Our customers do a lot more interesting things. Like we have folks that are doing daily price comparisons on shopping websites, folks that are doing media monitoring for reviews and stuff like that to help understand which products are performing better. And we have stuff for our property data. We do a lot of we provide a lot of information for people doing competitive intelligence in property markets and stuff like that. So it's cool to see the traditional process has been this sort of very messy web scraping, cleaning, deduping process. And once you make that all one simple call to an API, it becomes really fast, and you actually can spend time doing actual analysis work instead of annoying data collection work. That's the talk. I just want to keep it simple and short. So if you guys are interested, you can check out our website. You can get a demo of the data. Any questions?
Are you familiar with Dan Ariely's work?
I don't think so.
So you'll find those results on luxury brands and things much less mystifying.
Okay.
He has a book called Predictably Rational
that
talks about why do people seem to pay more for things that don't have the additional value. So check that out.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I'm curious, have you thought about at all about like if there's any bias or even how to deal with the bias, if there is bias in some of that data you were looking at, like the hotel rating data, for example? Like, is it possible that people in certain areas will rate with a certain bias? They're more critical than other areas, and then how?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, a lot of these, while we're writing these pieces, we always think of like new sort of next step ideas. That's a good one. It would be possible to do that. So we have stuff like the region or the city-state. Like some websites have that information, so we could collect that, and then we could obviously we have the review text, so we could see like city, state, and text what that yields in terms of like language and tone of voice and stuff like that based on regions. That would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you do like time series analysis to be able to identify like market movements and stuff like that?
Yeah, so our pricing data includes date scenes on those prices. So every time we see a price, we record when we saw it, and that's recorded. So we do have, I mean, the data has only existed since 2014, so it's not super long. Yeah, so you can see that price movement on a lot of products. And we've actually like kind of looked at it. You see these weird jumps where it's like, it'll like do this like crazy spike like very quickly.
Yeah, see those spikes all the time.
Yeah.
Quickly returning to the point Chris brought up, be interesting, like talking about biases by region. Like if there is like a marketplace such as Amazon that isn't based on a single geography. If ratings, there was a bias that certain regions or states rated lower, and if it was like is that kind of what you were getting at? Like a stylistic difference, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, that would be
control for that.
I think that'd be interesting to see like if that weighted back into what reviews were shown or that kind of stuff. Like you should be shown reviews from your city or state because that's going to be very different from someone else. Cool. So the next one I think we're going to be working on, I'm not sure yet, is actually related to Amazon. We're going to see if it's cheaper to eat at home versus going out to eat. So what I'm going to try and do, again, I'm still working on this, is look at like Food Network's top 20 family recipes and then find all the different ingredients, find the prices for those, and then find related items at menus online, and then compare the two, and we can actually solve that question too.
Add in organic versus non-organic as a variable.
That's true. Good point. All right. Thanks, everyone.